here to speak on behalf of slates for the elections. And what I like about the slates is that they bring more people to the elections because our friends and our families and our contacts, we bring them in. Our particular club at the ADEM election got 10 new members from that ADEM election because we got exposure to more people came. There were people who registered as Democrats and formerly weren't Democrats. So that was a plus, and I believe it's more inclusive if you just get more people coming to the process. And that's really just speaking in support of the space. That's right.
Yeah. I'd like to address that. The chairman, Hicks, has given this committee a charge to deal with a number of issues, and they're the issues that Emily just laid out. What I think of as political issues, such as slates, the participation of local elected officials in the ADEMs, that is not something that this committee is going to be looking at. So for committee, for everyone's knowledge. However, and I think many of you know this, the Rules Committee has a separate subcommittee called the, unsurprisingly, the ADEM subcommittee, which I happen to chair. This committee's recommendations are going to go to Chairman Hicks. They will then go to the ADEM committee for processing. But the ADEM committee as well, its jurisdiction includes these political issues. So we're not going to stop anybody from making testimony on these kinds of issues today, feel free, but none of those issues are anything that we are dealing with here. The ADEM subcommittee and the Rules Committee will hold separate hearings, and that would be a good time to talk about those kinds of issues. And I'm really going to try not to comment on every person, but I did want to make that clarification.
Could you clarify what you are going to be talking about with you today?
We did that at the beginning.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Diane Friedman and Ted McKinnon and on deck Andrew Sweatman.
Hello, I'm Diane Friedman from AD 74. I want to first say that the ADEM election that was conducted in our region could not have been better organized. It could not have had better volunteers. It could not, there's not one thing that could have been done other than the fact that we had an unbelievable turnout that was unprecedented and unexpected, and no matter how many people we had, it was going to be insufficient. So I think that we have to talk about the county, the management, the venues, and at the same time, we want to be sure that we get a lot of people to participate, either as ADEMs or as another sub-grouping, because we have so many resistance groups that have joined our democratic causes, and we need to include them. One of the things that we had asked for, which I know I spoke with Mr. King and Mr. Shea, we had written from our AD a survey. We had a very energetic group. And one of the things was to ask for a committee to look into ADEM reform. And lo and behold, look at what our chair has done. So could not be happier. But as I represent one of the successful ADEMs, I know that it is my responsibility to let you know that there are a lot of people out there who want to participate and be involved. And if there's some way to increase the number of ADEMs, I recognize, and I just spoke with the chair and mentioned how thrilled I am to see so many other committees being formed, this, financial reform, even the young ambassadors coming to so many of the committees. We need to be inclusive and just open up this big, wonderful tent of our party, because that's the only way that will be successful going forward. And I just want to say I did submit testimony on the site, and it included the survey that was done in AD 74. I probably used too many words as usual, but I thank you so much for what you're doing, and I thank you for this opportunity.
I have a question for her, actually. When you said that we should increase the number of ADEMs, what do you mean by that? Do you mean the number of ADEM meetings, or do you mean the number of ADEM meeting locations?
The number of people who are elected to be ADEMs.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just looking to increase participation in our party because we have so many enthusiastic people. In the past, I've been fortunate to be an ADEM. This is now going into my 11th year. And we've noticed as we've had increased participation that those people who are elected come to the meetings, they're activists in the communities, but we lose track of the people who also ran, and sometimes we don't have access to their contact information. And we want to keep them involved, and somehow we need to have anyone who's interested have an opportunity to participate in some way.
I'd like to speak for just a second too. I'm the Region 18 Director for AD 74.
And she's fabulous.
Thank you. And these are concerns that I heard throughout my region as well. And in the subcommittees, these are the exact issues that we are working on, how to increase participation as far as getting information out to the Democratic community and other issues that you addressed today, Dinah. So we are listening, we are doing our best to be as inclusive as possible, and this committee is very committed to improving the ADEM whole process.
Thank you. Ted McKinnon, Andrew Sweatland, and Lynn Blazer on deck.
Good morning. I'm Ted McKinnon. I'm an elected AD delegate from Assembly District 22 in San Mateo. My co-author for the submitted testimony is Bill Julian. He's an appointee of Cecilia Aguiar Curry in District 4 up in Yolo County. 40,000 activists participated in the 2019 ADEMs, and our party chair stated as a goal tripling this number. This makes the ADEMs the largest point of direct involvement between the CDP as an organization and its activist base. It is therefore very important that the quality of participation by this activist base at each ADEM is high in order to maintain continuity of engagement and enthusiasm in ongoing organizing efforts. Our state has 39 million residents and 9 million registered Democrats. Our party is largely run by volunteer activists. The combination of size, diversity, and volunteers makes training in process and rules very important so that activism of each participant is respected. Consistent application of rules and procedures promoted by good training will encourage both higher levels of participation at the ADEMs and greater continuity of participation ongoing. The critical role at the ADEMs is that of the convener, who has an enormous set of responsibilities, including site selection, scheduling, liaising with state chair and county committee chair, notifying all registered Democrats in the AD, presiding at the meeting, record keeping, recruiting and training assistants for sign-in, voter registration, voting, tallying, security, and transmission of all records. Expanding support for conveners is crucial for achieving and maintaining high levels of activist participation, particularly in light of the hope for increased numbers of participants, and this should be a high priority for CDP staff and officers, including regional directors. This should include a budget for training and facilities, training and best practices, assistance in volunteer recruitment, assistance in training ADEM volunteers, and assistance in publicizing the ADEM meeting. This will allow the convener to focus on organizing and running the meeting. ADEM locations should be conducive to a positive and hopefully festive atmosphere. The experience of in-person interaction versus mail ballot is critical in building relationship and solidarity, and a venue that is spacious and accessible for all Democratic constituents will enhance the probability of such an outcome. To allow candidates to properly prepare site-specific information such as meeting rooms devoted to polling and candidate speeches so in particularly large ADs, efforts should be made to identify and staff multiple locations to reduce travel time. This will mean more sites, more conveners, more volunteers, and more training. Each candidate who fulfills ADEM requirements should have access to lists forwarded to and maintained. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Sweatman. Okay, when I call your name, I need you to come up because we're trying to get as many to fit all the cards that we have. So we have Andrew Sweatman, and then we have Glenn Glazer, Addie Kessler on deck, Nicholas Stone, I believe, and then
Hello everyone, I'm a member of Blue Revolution and I'm here to talk about the Blue Revolution rules changes. I'd like to start specifically with one that I wrote having to do with the number of ballots to be printed. It's on page number 2, change number 2 of the packet, if you have one. It's point number 5. I'll begin reading it for the room. ADEM caucus conveners shall use the following formula to determine the number of ADEM's ballots to be printed before ADEM's elections are convened. At least, I'll make a small edit here, at least 30% more than the number of votes cast in the previous ADEM election. So the reasoning for this comes from my own district and my experience. In District 70, we ran out of ballots in 2017, and then in 2019, we ran out of ballots twice within the 2-hour voting window. Despite the fact that over 750 ballots were cast in 2017, only 500 ballots were printed and prepared ahead of time in 2019. And that's kind of the reasoning for this rule change. We believe it's just a matter of common sense, along with all the other rules changes we're proposing, are just common sense items that we hope you will seriously consider.
Glenn Glazer, state your assembly district number, Addie Kessler, and Nicholas Kessler.
Glenn Glazer, Executive Board ADEM Rep for Assembly District 29. This is an elaboration and continuation of testimony I've given prior, where we were talking about counting. Now, as other people have said, the conveners have a really hard job, and my heart goes out to them, because, if the rules are not precise, and if anything goes even slightly wrong, everyone just loses it and at them, and it's really not fair. Hello? One thing we can do is improve the counting and improve the counting speed. And the way we can do that is by counting the ballots like with a Scantron. Okay, one of the things about Scantrons is that there's a paper backup, right? It's not like we're going to, just count electronically. And then and here's the evolution of this, which is when we talk about Scantron, then people talk about price, right? We have 80 assembly districts, and so one halfway point would be to get one for every 2 districts. That would be 40 Scantron machines. Or we could increase the number of ADEM weekends and then have one per region, right? And then one Scantron per region, and then have the region director simply bring the Scantron to the appropriate one. But then there's an even better way. I just did a search for Scantron readers that are available on the Android platform. There are dozens of them. Most of them are free. I would be happy to put my money where my mouth is and lead a field team to test individual apps for our purposes and come back with recommendations to the committee on which one would be best. Like I said, there are dozens of these out here. And we could go and try them and see what works best. And that would be essentially free, or very low cost. And then we'd only be buying Scantron paper. And that would also solve the ballot problem, because if you just bought reams of Scantron, which are fairly cheap, you probably would run out of ballots. Okay.
Addie Kessler, Nicholas Kessler,
Thank you for this opportunity. Ad Kessler, AD 56. I would be remiss if I didn't say that in my experience, both as an RD and as a convener many times, the CDP staff has done an outstanding job in preparing the materials to handle instruction and how to manage these events. One of the things that is disappointing, however, when I am on a call preparing to be a convener, is to find that the number of conveners who are on the call seems to never even have read the material. I really want to emphasize that. And many of them seem to feel that they are at liberty to make changes to the process, which I believe leads to just chaos out there in the field. And I think that that is really a cause to a lot of the things that happen. I think both the RDs and the conveners must be held to a higher standard. I know that some people will find my comments offensive. I am sorry if that is the case. But RDs who do not get prepared early, conveners who don't get prepared early, these are serious symptoms of some of the things that happen out there. Locations do not meet standards that we have to be held to. No ADA, no internet hookups, no supplies on the premises. These are all problems that could be solved. Additionally, we have to talk about things like voter verification. That's not something they can solve on the site, but maybe we at the CDP can think about it. Maybe we can talk about early voter verification, something like voter online registration. Is it possible? Maybe not, but it's something we could think about. There was a lot of complaints that voters were not verified and there was voter fraud. It's a thought. Also vote counting. I think it's really important that we require a uniform method of voter counting. I saw David Atkins, who developed a vote counting method that was really cool. It might be something that could be the beginning of us all counting in the same way, a uniform way, that we could all point to and say, this is how vote counting needs to be done. I think these things could tremendously improve our system. As to participation, the first time I participated in this process, there were about 14 people in a vote count. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I really appreciate this. I think we can improve the system. Thank you.
Excuse me, one question for Aggie. I am not offended, by the way. That's why I convene all of my ADEMs personally as the regional director. But I was wondering if you had a rules change in mind or something that we could work with in terms of the better preparation problem.
I'm actually planning to testify because I seriously believe that people sign up to be RDs and people who are selected to be conveners need to basically commit to do their job and to do it right. Because when I saw how many people brought action to the CRC as a result of this, I was mortified for our party because we should not be slinging arrows at each other over a process that is meant to be clean and straightforward and legitimate, when it is, some of it is caused by the people who are running the event and should be doing it correctly.
Well, looking forward to the suggestions. Thanks.
Yes.
Do you think that maybe these issues can just be resolved?
I would ask the committee members identify themselves before they ask the question.
Gracie Torres, member of Process Subcommittee, AD 61. Do you think these issues can be resolved with just more training, or do you really think there's like a malice? I mean, how do we solve this? Outside of this?
I think that people need to take their job seriously and follow procedure. That's what I believe.
And Anissa Martinez, Vanessa Martinez.
You have the hardest job of the day, don't you?
Thank you, members of the committee. Nicholas Caston, 8010 Sonoma County. It's good to see so many familiar and also new faces around the table right now. My comments are going to be in line with those I've given to the Rules Subcommittee at past hearings, and but I would like you all to hear them as well. My experience over the last 19 years being active in this party has led me to be a delegate and e-board member through pretty much every way possible, including having been an ADEM, e-board member, convener, volunteer, vote tabulator, etc. And I've seen it from when we've had 10 people show up to hundreds of people show up, and kind of the growth we've witnessed. And I hope that that perspective helps you in this very important task. I believe firmly that the ADEMs are the access point to the state party for every Democrat in the state. Whether they're elected or an activist, whether they're not active and would like to be involved and have us hear their opinions, or whether or not it is their first time engaging in the party or they've been involved in the party for 40 or 50 years. ADEMs are where every Democrat has a right to be involved, and the rules should enable everyone to be able to be involved. As such, I really want you to consider the concept of the missing middle. I find myself in this generation, myself now as a parent who is struggling to run a company, be involved in politics, and continue my dedication to this party. And I understand now why we don't have so many folks involved in central committees and clubs between about 30 and 55. And that's a missing middle because it is very difficult to be involved when you have to show up to time-set meetings on the weekends, when you have to go after hours during dinner time and bedtime in order to be able to be considered an active or valued member of this party. As such, I really encourage you to implement vote by mail. I believe vote by mail would directly solve many of the capacity and verification issues that have been raised, and also increase participation in this party in a way that we could exponentially increase the volunteers, the people who are able to sign up to engage in whatever way they can, whether it's being an internet activist, whether it's being someone who shows up to meetings. Vote by mail could enable a consistent review process to verify voter eligibility and a consistent counting process done at centers that don't require on-site instant gratification counting. We've all gotten used to waiting for our election results to come a month later in this state. We can be used to it here if it means that we get the results right and we don't have to involve the CRC and the Rules Committee after every damn election. So I really urge you to consider this as a serious proposal. I believe it'll be cost effective, and I also believe that you will see great benefits for the party statewide. Thank you.
And all that testify that you should also submit your testimony online. Joy Fruit.
Hi. I'm Joy Fruit from AB 75, San Diego County, Fallbrook. My experience with the ADEM committee and the feedback I've gotten from our fellow constituents in our local committee is that it seemed like an old boy network. And in our case, there has been a slate that is always run by the same person time after time, and she selects who's going to be on the slate. They're mostly from the largest city in our region, or at least where seems like the people with the most pull live. It's the oldest people in their late 70s who have been involved for a long time. And they select who's going to be on the slate, and they have an agreement that everybody and their friends are going to vote for them. And if you come from one of the smaller chapters or areas, clubs, then you have very little ability to get selected to ADEM. This is my first time as ADEM, hopefully my last, because I'd like to get younger people to be in charge. More younger people, like Emily and Gracie. I would also like to suggest that people decide what they're going to be a delegate for. If you're on the central committee and you want to be a delegate, then ask to be chosen by the central committee. And usually they are. But why waste our time running for the ADEM and also be on the central committee? And you know you're going to get selected anyway. And then you have to go through the process and, oh, the person who came in 8th or 9th, maybe you'll get selected because these other people got selected by the central committee, so now they can quit. But they don't really want to quit because they want to choose who they're going to bestow their double selection on. So I think they should just choose one. And I want to thank Deborah because she has encouraged more participation for our local ADEMs. Thank you.
Matt Filler, and Michael Saunders, and Leslie Esper.
My name is Danessa Tillis. I'm with Assembly District 9 in Sacramento County. I first want to say that I support all of the Blue Revolution ADEM rule changes, and I hope that they are implemented. Additionally, and to Aggie's point, somebody asked what proposed rule change we could make in order for conveners to pay attention to their jobs. We could pay them. They do a lot of work, and we should pay them accordingly commensurate with their responsibility to this party. I understand the party is a primarily volunteer organization, but it is very financially challenging, and it is part of what keeps all of the young people out, like myself and like Emily and like Gracie. So I would encourage that, and I know that's a different committee, but I just wanted to say it here for the record. I also wanted to say, just to a couple points of people previously, I do also I support expanding elected representatives. Somebody said that earlier. I support Glenn Glazer's suggestion for Scantrons, and it is very easy to do on the phone. We all bring in our laptops in order to do, the convenience of the elections. People just bring in their laptops, so security is not paramount in those situations. It's very easy to use your phone. And let's see. There should be a much larger budget for ADEM elections, which isn't included in any of these rule changes. But somebody did mention that earlier. Our ADEMs were convened in places that were either free or we could skip and save. I know in 2017, I stood in line for 2 hours in the pouring rain and thunder because the space just didn't hold enough people, and they didn't anticipate 1,000 people showing up after the election of Trump to vote. And then rules should be the same for everybody, and I'm specifically talking about ballot counting. I appreciated your suggestion, Mr. Atkins. And I think that we should be able to watch the votes, and that doesn't happen in every convenience, so that is something that should be universal. And then finally, I just wanted to address Article 6 under Section 1. There's a rule change that talks about, in Section B, voting electronically, which I definitely support, but it is limited to 24 hours in advance of the in-person meeting, and I don't see the value in that. We could expand that for a 2-week, for instance, voting process. And I also believe that a mailer should be sent to every registered Dem in line with vote by mail, but less costly and less environmental waste. That we could vote by mail, and every person that's a registered Dem in their district would get a notice that they could vote online or in person at this time and place. Thank you.
Matt Filler, Michael Saunders, Leslie Esper, please come up.
I'm Matt Filler, 72nd AD, Orange County. I was an ADEM candidate. We had someone, there was a sign over the ballot boxes that said, "Please do not fold your ballot." And I asked why, and they said it was because it would make it easier to count. But there was a central committee, county central committee member, executive committee member who was standing by the ballot box taking ballots, looking at them and throwing them, putting them in the box. I don't know what his motives were, but it certainly suggested some things that would be improper. And when it was time to, and the convener was happy with that. When it was time to count, we asked to be to monitor. Several people from different slates and independents wanted to monitor. We were allowed to sit in the corner of the room. At one end of the room, there's a table like this, a little bigger, with people all around it. So, and I observed people pick up 2 ballots, look at the top one and mark and put 2 ballots down and try to stop it. And they said, oh, you can't. You have to go through the convener. You're sitting at the table on the other side of the table. By the time I did that, there were 3 or 4 ballots on top. So there was no ability for the observers to do what people do, as we all saw in the Florida election, where you observe and make sure that they're counting correctly. I also had multiple people, I had people that I knew were MPP that were agreed to register as Democrats when they got there. They were not asked about their party preference, they did not register. I'm a little uncomfortable with slates ending up having been the main way to get people. And if you invite people through other means and make sure people know about it, other than by someone coming up to the door or organization or whatever and telling them about the ADEM, nobody's ever heard of it until you tell them about it, and then they're coming to vote for someone without knowing the rest of the candidates. And there's no incentive for the slate candidates to tell people where they can look at who the candidates are.
All right, so one question for you here, because there's 2 competing principles involved, right? David Atkins. If they're looking at your ballot, technically the ADEM is supposed to be a secret ballot, right? But there's nothing marked on your ballot saying who you are. When those volunteers are looking at that ballot, it's usually because there's so many spoiled ballots. A lot of people overvote, they do certain things.
This was not a volunteer.
All right, right, and checking that. So, right, there's 2 competing principles. One is a secret ballot principle. The other is just helping people, because helping people not spoil their ballots. How would you resolve that?
Well, part of it is to have better instructions. There should have been instructions on the back of the ballot. There weren't. And to have someone available to check ballots if people want their ballot to be checked. That would probably be the best way to resolve that.
Yes. Nicole Fernandez, 8022. I was wondering if you could tell me what you would want to do to relieve the distance between the counters and the observers, because you want an accurate count where you don't want folks, you want them to be concentrating on counting and looking out for the spoiled ballots. So what would you do, or what ideas would you put forward to bridge the distance other than like physically moving forward? What would make it comfortable for you in order for you to have access to those who are counting? And it sounds like you don't want to go through the convener if you see something amiss. So tell me what you would propose to do on that front.
Well, I can only say what I saw in Dade County, which was that they had two counters, and which they did, and then across from them were sitting observers, and there would be a limited number of observers per count, maybe, depending on how many people want to observe. But rather than putting all the counters around the table, if you have the counters on one side and observers on the other, and then have some protocol for, you raise your hand if you see a problem, and then they stop counting until the problem is resolved, rather than an emphasis on getting them counted and just get them counted as quick as you can and keep the observers from interfering.
I also have a question. Deborah Cunningham-Skurnick, Region 18 Director as well. I was a convener for AD 76, and we had over 800 show up to vote. and we had multiple tables set up in the room to count afterwards. And there was observers, plenty of observers from all different parties, but there was a few people that wanted to hover over. And that made it really difficult to count because we were so concentrated on making sure we counted every single paper and that everything was as accurate as possible. So I understand people want to have a question, and if people ask, I did answer them if there was any kind of a concern. But it's very difficult as a convener that you're trying to do the best you can to count every ballot and then make sure that everyone has the same direction and that we're doing the best job. So I think we can, to me, Scantron would be the best because as a regional director, counting is just a nightmare. But in
Deborah, is there a question there?
Yeah, my question, I'm sorry. My question is, how close do you want observers to be? What would be good for you?
Well, you need to be able to see the ballots that they're counting and see where the marks that they're making. So that's why I said across the table, maybe a table a little wider than this, but.
Okay, thank you.
And you know, they had it all in a small room and there's one big table and all of the people were counting were around that one table. We had, I think, 2,000. So there were a lot to count. And I understand, you know, the urgencies, but there were also, well, that's all record about the different people for the executive board. But
all right, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. I'm Rivette Judah of AD 65, and I did conduct an election, I believe, in AD 72.
Yes.
And I understand your concerns. My question to you is, as a person who conducted an election and I watched what happened, having somebody in very close proximity is extremely stressful. It is extremely stressful because even the people, like let's say the people that sit from a distance, they feel like we had people, we had like 8 counters and we double counted, right? When you have somebody really close hovering, it makes the counters nervous, whether you believe that, and it's not because they're trying to cheat, it's because they're trying to do their job correctly. So my question to you is this. What is it that made you feel unsafe or sort of insecure about the way the counting method and observing method was done? And I apologize, I'm sure you stated it, but just kind of summarize that for me because I do care about the process.
I could not see the marks on the ballots in the most cases, and I could not see where they were marking on their forms. I mean, I don't know what you're observing for if you're not looking to see whether the ballot is marked correctly when they do it.
Valid point, but I believe the observing is that we're not dumping ballots, right, or something like that. I mean, is that the idea? Because like they said, if somebody's marking a ballot, like even if you're from a distance and I say I marked a ballot, let's say I marked someone that I wanted, whatever, you'll be able to see that. So it's not utilized that way. You'd be able to see it. In my opinion, you'd be able to see it. I hope that we do switch to an electronic method. That way these issues are no longer a problem.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
would certainly
This is
go.
Dina Eichelsrud from AD 50. So in regards to what Mervette had asked you, we had a case, we actually allowed in our AD that we ran elections, we allowed, as one, we allowed as many observers to stand as close to the counters, but I will tell you it's very trying and stressful for the counters. So do you have any suggestions for what we could do to make it less stressful for the counters while still letting you guys observe? Do you have anything? Because it's a focus thing, but I'd like to know if there's anything that you would like to offer the counters.
Well, I think you just need to introduce people and set up the expectation that that there are going to be people observing, that they're doing a public process and that it has to be right. And they need to just go about their business and then stop if there's a question. I think that can be set up in a way that the counters are expecting that and understand how it works. And that was what if you watch what happened when they were televising that in Dade County in 2000, that was what was going on. And by the way, with respect to the automated systems, I've heard some suggestions for cheaping out on that, but we need to make very sure that those systems are secure. And some of the suggestions that I heard didn't sound like they were secure.
Thank you, Mr. Phillip.
So we have Michael Saunders, Leslie Esther, please come up, Chris Duvali on deck, and then it'll be Rogelio Garcia. And just a reminder that we go until noon and look at all the folks that want to make comments. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michael Saunders. I'm the executive representative from Assembly District 5. I'm from El Dorado County. Our county district spans from El Dorado County to Mariposa. So one of the things I have to talk about is pretty much maybe the same for all of the rural districts that are in the assembly process. So the problem with our ADEM process, even when it's at a central location, we have a 4-hour span in rural winding counties. So even with 2 locations, ours was a 2-hour drive. The time of the ADEM election for the people in South Lake Tahoe, Truckee, and other areas, if there's any snow, they are not going to be able to participate at all. So one is even increasing locations isn't going to be adequate. So the vote by mail option is a very good option. And since we are moving toward vote by mail for all elections in California, I don't see why that's not a good option. The other thing dealing with our location and participation is it puts all of the candidate presentations at one event at one time. And if there's a lot of candidates, it puts a lot of time where most of the time is being spent on the candidate presentations. Very little is spent on how to run the ballots, how to fill everything out, so everything's kind of rushed. So if there's a possibility to have a Assembly District Forum where this can be live streamed ahead of time, where all of the candidates are able to give out their statements and presentations beforehand. The same other problem with the rural communities is internet connection, so even live streaming between the locations, it's very difficult to hear what the other candidates in different locations have. In terms of participation, this is an invisible process for a lot of the Democratic members. The only reason I found out about this process was because I became involved in the Central Committee. So that's one thing where we have to let the people in our party know that this process exists. The other problem I have with this as well is a lot of things, as we know, is there are establishment players. So even if you're in a central committee, the same people all the time, many times become the delegates. If you're in a smaller county, and it's in the same location, the people that are closest to it, the people have the more access to it are the ones that are going to be delegates. So the further out you go, the less representation you have. So limiting who can participate based on if you're in a central committee or not isn't a good option in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie Esther and Chris Duvali and Rogelio Garcia on deck.
Hi, my name is Leslie Esther. I am an elected delegate from Assembly District 2. I'm really happy to be following Michael because I'm going to keep on the same theme that he had about rural districts. Our district encompasses all our parts of 5 counties. If you start at the Oregon border and drive south for 6 hours, you will get to the end of it. And so my testimony here is an idea to increase the participation. I am not a fan of vote by mail, even though I do it by myself for my elections at home, just because I think that as we see this exponential growth of people participating in the ADEM process, I think that we are exciting people when they see hometown democracy in action. And so my idea, like I said, we have all our parts of 5 different districts. We span 6 hours if you want to drive one to the end. I'd like to see in these rural big districts, if there is a county or more than one county that we have sites at the county seat, or if it's a portion of a county that we have a site at the biggest city in that portion of the county. So I know for us that would make it, 5 different things as opposed to the one that we are allowed to have. And then if we beg and mention that we have mountainous roads and snow, we can get 2. So myself, that's my idea, is that we go ahead and place 1 election site in each county or the biggest city of each county. And it would maybe save me, as I did this January, driving 4 hours through the rain one way to get to my election site. And I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Husband.
Chris Duvalli, Rogelio Garcia, Naida Tushnet, and Jimmy Gao.
Good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to thank everybody and welcome you to Long Beach. As one of the delegation 8070, we're very gracious that you are coming to the convention in Long Beach. And if I can assist relative to dining, where to get a delicious glass of wine or the best martini, please don't be afraid to ask, because I know it all. I've had it all here in Long Beach.
First off, member of Blue Revolution, this is Ad Hoc Blue Revolution here in 8070. And essentially what we're doing is implementing the democratic process in the ADEM election. And as you can see, the packet that we had handed out, it's pretty fundamental, and as Andrew stated, common sense, that is our intent here. I'm going to speak on the first item relative to the E-Board elected at the ADEM. Right now, currently, we only have one individual that is elected as an E-Board representative at the ADEM elections, and that can both be either male or female. What we intend to do here is open that up to whatever your gender identification is, which is, once again, fundamental and very democratic to have equal representation at the E-Board. And to go even further, we had the great compromise a few years later with the three-legged stool, where there's a third, and that's imbalanced right now. Right now, our party's business at the E-Board meetings is conducted by more appointees than those that are elected. And it's time that we implemented the business of our party is ran by those that are democratically elected as opposed to appointed. I'm also going to jump over to item 2. Thank you, folks. Item number 2, rules change number 2, I'm going to speak on item number 4. And this is from personal experience. So we have experiences in 8070 locally, as well as up in 8063. I'm going to read where it says argument in favor, and then I'll jump up to the actual wording of the rules change. And just to let everybody know, these actually have all been submitted to the Rules Committee dating back to 2017, have gone to subcommittees and died. So we're bringing these back because these issues are consistent. And we need these issues to come back to the Rules Committee, and we need help from you folks back here to contact Rules Committee members and as Ad Hoc Committee members in support of these. Because in the past, there's been 10 of us, 3 of us, and they died in the subcommittees. And they need to be put forth and amended to our bylaws. Item is, during past officer elections in several jurisdictions, there were questions raised about the legitimacy of ADEM participants being registered Democrats and eligible to vote in the ADEM elections. Rules change number 4 up here will change that. So wording, no later than midnight, 2 weeks prior to the ADEM election, the regional director shall obtain by electronic or print format the current roster of registered Democrats in the Assembly District. Any individual not on that list that intends to vote must register as a Democrat at the election venue prior to receiving the ballot. My personal story is that when I was whipping in 8070 here at the ADEM election, I went up to several folks, informing them, they inquired with me, what exactly is an ADEM? And these folks are in line. Right now, you sign an affidavit. I had folks, when I said, oh, this is to be a representative of this Assembly District in the Democratic Party, the response was, oh, I have to be Democrat? Verbatim. And I pointed them to the registration table. I don't know if they're registered or not, but this will guarantee that.
All right.
Thank you, folks.
One question. So this is David Atkins, Regional Director. All right. So with regard to rules change 3 about increasing participation, be it vote by mail or vote by email, this goes for everyone with this suggestion. Because the purpose of the ADEM, my big concern here, and a lot of other folks have the same concern, is that the purpose of the ADEM is to increase activist and organizer participation, right? If you do this, what prevents legislators, aligned large organizations from basically telling their entire mailing list and email list who their slates are to vote for and dramatically actually increasing establishment for? Because those mailing lists are going to be out of the local organizer or out of everybody else.
That actually already exists. I will say 8063, I was there working for friends and fellow Blue Revolution folk. The money of that district had 5 buses come in loaded with people. So that exists right now at the current processes. So all this is doing is increasing that. And 8070, I don't know if you guys can, step outside, take a look to the left, you see a beautiful island called Catalina. Those people who come vote in the ADEM election have to pay several $100s. They have to take a ferry over, then they have to stay in a hotel because the ferry's limited on time, and then they have to take the ferry back.
couple $100 for AD 70. We have an island and we got 200 plus, 650 registered Democrats over there that can't come vote in ADEM. And that's the purpose of item number 3. Actually, Chris Rosen will speak on behalf of that as well.
Hi, this is Dina. I go through 8050. So, if you were to go to the vote by mail idea, how would you make it equal for a poor person to run as a delegate to compete with a legislator who emailed his entire group of people? How would you make it so that poor people could have equal access to all of those people and have the funds to get their voters out?
Well, actually, the item number 3 is for electronic voting. We got a service that is a software voting company, and they were the consultant, and you can actually see we actually have a proposal from them that we did submit to Rules Committee. And what this does is it opens up the venue. You know, come on, we're the party of working class folks, guys. People are working at that 2.5 hour window, waiting on tables, you know, or taking care of their kids or whatnot. We need to give an opportunity for inclusivity in our party. And to me, once again, that's fundamentally democratic, and that's introducing that to the ADEM election.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And I have cards for folks who are in support. Pass out.
Rogelio Garcia, Nida Tushnet, Jimmy Gao, and Chris Rowan. Thank you. Please state your assembly district and remember that all testimony you should submit it in writing. Thank you.
Rogelio Garcia, AD 75, Riverside County. I want to say thank you to all of you for being here this morning. And I want to thank all the volunteers who helped make the ADEM elections a success. In particular, I would like to thank Mark Wells from Menifee, Denise Salas Gore from Menifee, and Gail Paulson from Corona. I had the opportunity to work on 4 ADEM elections. I was a convener for 2, assistant convener for 2, and I got to see firsthand some of the issues that need to be addressed. I would suggest having all of the voters to register online with our website so that way they can be verified as Democrats, and those who choose to register on that day should be provided a provisional ballot. And I also believe it may be best for people to be able to vote online on their cell phones or on a computer, and there should be 2 printouts, one in Sacramento and one at the local ADEM location or locations. Besides that, I just want to say thank you for all the work you do. The ADEMs are a reflection and a sense of measurement of our party's strength, and things look great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nida Tushnet, Jimmy Gao, please come up. Oh, there's a question. Rogelio.
I'm back.
Hi, I'm Margaret Oguzumi, and I live in 8024. So you mentioned a bunch of solutions. I'd like to hear a little bit about what specific problems you observed in your experience that you would like for us to fix.
Well, this is long. But one of the things I realized noise, it can get very loud. Luckily, I had amazing volunteers who helped me control the noise level. Some people were offended that someone would ask them to keep it down, and I found that was very hurtful. But one of the things I did realize that needs to be improved is accounting. That's why if we have a computer station for the account, that can really help a lot. But in case we do stay with paper ballots, if people are going to be voting for a slate, could the slates be official and be provided a number so that way people just write a number on the ballot, and that can save us quite a bit of time, respectfully.
So it just sounds like the biggest issue you encountered then was the whole time that the process took, because you mentioned something about pre-registering voters, so I'm just trying to understand.
Well, in regards to pre-registering, the big factors, the verification with our Democrats. The second, it's the lines. Luckily, I have a layout and a demeanor in which it maximizes efficiency, and I have volunteers who never gave up. We had some issues. I did encounter some issues, which I would rather not speak of today. But I dealt with them and I took actions as needed. It's just if we can verify that every voter is a Democrat, and in case they were to count a person whose vote shouldn't be counted, then it'll be easier to remove instead of throwing away the whole election and reviewing it. Because we cannot afford to create hostility among our communities. San Francisco, I did walk into the wrong room and I heard some agents were wrong stories, and that's not fair to anyone.
Gracie Torres, 8061. I want to go to the provisional ballot measure. Our goal for this committee is to increase participation. Do you not believe that provisional ballots or basically saying your vote doesn't count yet, wouldn't that kind of lower our participation?
Well, we currently have provisional ballots, and provisional ballots are counted separately. Even at the pre-tax endorsement, provisional ballots do have their own category, and there's nothing wrong with anyone who has provisional ballot. It's as valid as a regular ballot. It's just as a means for verification. But in my idea, provisional ballots opens up opportunity to non-registered Democrats at that time in that RV system. So this way, non-Democrats who just registered or brand new Democrats are going to opportunity to vote.
Well, they have that opportunity now, right? That's one of the things that is enticing is that you can register that day and vote that day. But if you're told that, hey, you can register now, but your vote may or may not count, you don't think that would deter people from coming in and voting?
Their vote counts, provisional ballots are could count.
Maybe, right, the provisional?
I'm sorry, I do not know what you mean.
I'm asking if you don't think that will deter people not ensuring that their vote that they need to be verified first. Does that make sense? No? No. I'm asking, I'm actually curious. If I'm not sure my vote will count, and if I register that day, would I come back? Is what I'm saying.
Their vote will be counted if they do follow through and become fully registered Democrats as soon as possible. Because ADEM are held over the weekends, and our RVs not open during the weekends, so that new data can be inputted unless if they register online and their RVs very efficient and they're registered right away. But because we're dealing with a government agency, which takes a little bit of time, because as soon as you register as a new registered voter, you need to verify that you live there. And so it's a technical process. But the provisional ballots, be assured that every vote is counted.
Yes. Okay, so Manuel Sabata, 8013. My only concern is that I just got here because I flew Southwest, and that's my issue. My only problem is that I keep hearing suggestions to fix ADEMs, but I feel like it's kind of taking away the organizing part of it. There's online ballots and, like you said, official slates. And I feel like that's going to make the process even more insider.
Yes.
And when you the thing is there's a lot of people that put activist organizer on their profiles, and I kind of felt like ADEMs is always the Olympics seem to be actually.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying don't you think that deters from people actually being able to organize against establishment that everyone has this fear of? Especially the official slates part.
I'm not here for pro-open slates. That's not my thing. My point's made. My point is, in regards to counting those ballots, if people could just put a slate number, that way we could have it separated. Because in the training, we were instructed that if there's a slate, a ballot, we can just separate it and count it in order to speed up the process. That was in the very last phone training we had, which was a curveball, and I did appreciate that advice because it did help a lot.
That's news to me.
Yeah, I'll go through 8050. I just have a quick question for you. So if I hear what you're saying, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Are you saying that you would find it helpful if we put on our website for people to pre-register, so when they came, they could get in a line as pre-verified, like going to the airport, your pre-TSA check, and then you go to the ADEM, and if you haven't pre-registered, you can register on site, or be verified on site.
Ideally, I believe people should register online, and they should go online, and as soon as they hit submit, 2 printouts should be printed. One in the ADEM locations, and one in Sacramento. So that way, we can see and monitor the activities on those particular days or times, and that way we can speed up the process. I'm not here to make anyone feel their voice or their votes is not counted. I just want the efficiency to assure transparency and timeliness.
Thank you. I have a question. I heard you say something about you would like to facilitate it by assigning members to slates. Do you find that would be problematic? Since you've convened elections, right? You stated. Would you find that that's problematic?
That is in continue with a paper format. That way, people, the slates who have their friends or their group of supporters, we can count it quicker. I'm seeing it for the stance as a counting process. I'm not seeing that as a way to favor any particular candidate.
Okay. So I can tell you from someone who's ran myself like in an election and run an election. Both sides.
Sorry, committee members, this is a hearing, this is to take testimony.
I want to make a point.
Okay, well, no, but the point here is not to make a point. And I'm sorry, but we have very limited time and we want to hear from as many of us as possible.
So, Naida Hushnet, Jimmy Gow, Chris Rowan, and William Monroe. Thank you.
David Tushnet, April 70. I'm speaking to the third Blue Revolution and 18 Rules Change, which is about multiple electronic voting on multiple sites. One of the issues that looms large for AD 70 and for other ADs, as we've heard from rural districts, it also applies to this urban Long Beach district, Long Beach, San Pedro, Catalina Island. The time and location of the AD elections mitigate participation from many individuals. In AD 70, that includes Catalina Island. Current practices either require expensive travel, or inability to vote. This also happens in rural districts. We understand that, and so it's not just our issue, and it's not just a rural issue. It also affects working people who are working over the lunch hour on weekend, or working on weekends, and that affects in our district people working on the docks in San Pedro, getting off, getting over the bridge, getting here, makes it almost impossible for them to come over their lunch hour and go back to work. So the solution is to either have remote locations, electronic voting, or vote by mail. I actually favor multiple locations rather than the others, but any of those would solve that problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jimmy Gow, State of AD and County, Chris, and William Monroe, and Stephen Schwartz.
Jimmy Gow, Torrance Dems, Los Angeles County, 66 AD, and my comments are in the form of a request. I request that this body, or perhaps Mr. King, your subcommittee, create or confirm the existence of an appropriate avenue for the redress of grievances regarding the voting process, so that any candidate who believes that the result of an ADEM election that was flawed or inaccurate has a means to file a protest or a complaint.
Mr. Gow, we have that conflict with the Review Commission.
Is what?
The Compliance Review Commission, Article 12.
And so do candidates who are running for ADEMs, are they clear that that is the process for addressing those complaints and?
Yes.
So then there would be no point in which any other avenue of protesting the result of an ADEM should be taken by the candidate.
That is the process that is set out in the bylaws, and we have challenges every single cycle.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Hello, Chris Robeson, I'm elected ADM 70 district, and part of the Blue Revolution. And real quick, Blue Revolution is about party reform. You know, we've been before a committee for the last 2.5 years with proposals, concrete proposals, that usually wind up referred to committee, and we participate in the last couple of subcommittees with the mics off. So there's no input to the subcommittee, which can kill something by just saying the motion died.
That will change.
It needs to, all right? We need to have open meetings. But that's not what I'm here to talk about.
We appreciate your comments.
I will comment because it's not on my agenda either. I heard from David, and I know our regional director tend to have a very hands-on approach to conveners. But if you read the bylaws, it says that the regional director is to identify and recruit conveners. And if they can't find one, they're supposed to come back to the E-board, okay? And not give them free license to run their districts the way they want to. That's in the bylaws now, we're going to change that. The reason I bring it up, we need to open this party up. And one way is to get new conveners for the first time. I convened a delegate selection for 2 conventions, so I know the process. It's a lot of work, I get that. But we need to get new people and younger people into the party. And I think we need to do something I've done, is that step up and step back. Learned it from Obama. But basically, I've had sort of five or six sessions, but not sequential, to allow other people to come forward in the back. So electronic voting is in front of you. The biggest issue is security, and I won't get into the details, but individual one-time passwords are issued and then expire after the vote. All right, so that's a security issue. We have not addressed the cost because we don't know the scope. And it's really hard because we have these events that used to have in Ventura County where I live. I was not elected, but there were only 5 candidates, so there was no election. That's all changed, all right? So the other thing I want to make sure is everybody knows that the real issue, you know, we're not supposed to talk about politics, but this is a 3-legged stool, all right? And this is the leg where the activists, grassroots activists, and that's where we make a distinction, okay? Everybody here is an activist. Everybody here is a progressive, maybe. But they're not all grassroots. Some of you are under the direct or indirect control, and I'm going to say it out loud, of the Speaker of the House Assembly of California. Is running buses into 8063, is organizing communities of color, which is great if they're being organized. They've never voted before. They don't even understand and speak English, don't know who the candidates are. They're told how to vote by the community leaders. That was 80-70. And then we have our convener who fumbled on the ballots. Why is that important? We have longshore people coming in on their lunch hour to vote. No ballots, they had to go back to work. Didn't get a vote. We got 11 out of 14, and that's great. But we could have done the whole thing. No, well, -1. All right, anyway, please take this full report into consideration. Please reintroduce or recommend reintroduction of the ones that the Rules Committee tabled. Okay?
Thank you.
Chris, one question. I don't want to get other speakers, but again, same question, right? You're concerned about grassroots participation. If your proposal to increase the electronic and mail balloting, how do you prevent basically the establishment, as you would see it, from controlling that entire leg of the stool during this?
Well, I'll tell you how. We've organized. Okay, a gentleman over here said this is about organizing. That's always been the defense. The ADEM election shows the strength of organizing. No, it shows the ability of a bus and go to a nursing home and pick up people and bring them to vote. That's what it does. This would not happen. And we would organize just what we do now. And it would be a democratic process. And I would encourage the people in the establishment, I don't know if anybody's here, would make some controls, offer to the speaker to stop this nonsense. Okay?
This Reports to Snarls, 8061, right in front of you.
I have a question for you. I mean, you brought up the issue about bringing buses with folks that didn't even speak English, right? And they were organized by the organizer, right?
By the speaker of the assembly. And
They were organized, right? But then you also mentioned that it's good to organize our folks and get them involved. It's all about inclusivity, right? And we can't exclude folks from this process just because they do not speak English. As you said, I heard you say it.
Yeah, but that's one of the ways that it's done, okay, with these in-person elections. So the 19-year-old Latino doesn't speak English and has to work at Ralph's on Saturday, doesn't get to vote. And he may not speak English. So don't make this about race or about ethnicity.
I'm not making it about race, but I'm just bringing up what you said.
And our ballots, everything's bilingual, so that's not an issue. Right?
I'm just saying, organizing is organizing. So
Some is good,
whether they're brought in the bus or they come on their own, at least they're there participating and exercising their right. And that's what I have to say.
Stephen Schwartz, Maria Estrada on the on-deck circle, and Melissa Mickelson on the on-deck circle. Oh, sorry.
This question actually applies to a lot of people that are talking about electronic voting. And you mentioned you were the closest to talking about how it partially can be secured. But one of the things that certainly has got to be a concern is that level of security. Nevada and Iowa had proposed to the DNC to have electronic voting. The DNC determined that the security issue was too prevalent, that people can hack systems and modify the vote count in those two caucuses. So they proceeded with the delegate selection process in those two respective states, but they were prohibited.
Eighth question, please.
So my question is, kind of walk through the answer, how are we going to make, if we do electronic voting, how we ensure the security of that voting, that one, it doesn't get hacked, and two, it's an appropriate person that's voting.
In your packet is a proposal from a firm that is, as much as they can, guarantee security. So the security issue's been addressed. How many of you have an ATM card? Come on, there's technology that can secure.
There's skimmers too, come on.
No, come on.
You go to a gas station, get your card.
Apply the technology.
No debates, no debates. Thank you.
Mr. Monroe, Stephen Schwartz, Maria Estrada on deck, and Melissa Mickelson on deck. 18 number, please.
Buenos días, me llamo Bill Monroe, el director del Regional 1E, Region 1E Regional Director with AD1 and AD3. Yes, we need to be inclusive of everyone. I would like to praise Unique and Casey and Emma at the state. They are always so very helpful. They take calls and not complain. They supply everything in a timely manner, and it's wonderful. So I'm new to this regional director business, but we did put on an ADEMS last year that I think was fairly successful. We had 2 locations in 81, which is one of these enormous districts the size of West Virginia, and in 83 we had 1. I'm here because I'm concerned about this thing about verification of voters. That we are Democrats, we do not believe in voter ID. It says right on the ballot, I confirm that I'm a Democrat. And I swear or affirm or whatever it says, but it's right there, and it's fraud. And if you vote without being a Democrat, when we did register in '83, we registered about 15 people. In '81, we registered about 9 on site, and those folks voted, and it all went fairly smoothly. We did have problems a little bit with the internet connection between the two sites in 81, but all the speakers spoke. So my other point was, yeah, please don't do voter ID. And the other point was, please allow more local control of the agenda of the meeting. I would like to see a start point in which the speakers speak, and the voting does not start until after the speakers have spoken. So it gives, if folks want to come in and vote and leave, they can come in and vote and leave after the speakers have spoken. And that's all I got.
Mr. Monroe, actually, I had a quick question. You're aware that many challenges have come to the CRC, and the CRC has actually overturned elections because of ineligible voters participating. So while I agree 100% with you about the ID, you're not saying that you should never verify people's eligibility to participate as long as they say that they are in the district.
If they say they're in the district and they say they're Democrats, they should be able to vote. Now, if you want to go back and verify later if there's an issue, then yeah, that's fine. But when I'm out registering voters, and I register a lot of voters, and they say that they are a resident of Chico, I register them. I don't look at their ID and make sure that they have an address in Chico. That's just the way it works. Okay?
Thank you.
Stephen Schwartz, Maria Estrada, Melissa Nicholson, Eddie Burson.
I'm a member of the Central Committee of Riverside County. I'm also the chair of the 8075 caucus in Riverside, and I represent the Temecula Valley Democratic Club. Yes, sir.
Your name for the record.
Stephen Schwartz. I want to follow up on what my co-member Aggie Kessler said about who can vote and who can't vote. When we participated in the vote in 8075, you came in, there were people sitting at a table, you signed in. Nobody asked you if you were a Democrat, nobody asked you if you were from 8075. I trust my fellow Democrats, but I don't think that process is enough to make sure that everyone who votes is in fact eligible to vote. I'm against voter ID. Maybe we need to have a list prepared from the registrar of voters for the people who are there taking the votes, but I'm sorry, I'm a little more skeptical than some of my fellow Democrats that everyone who came is actually registered and in that district. Thank you.
Maria Estrada, Melissa Nicholson, Eddie Burson, and Francisco Ramos.
My name is Maria Estrada, I'm with 8063, and I am the district. My election, my name was left off the ballot. Emma Harper stated that she did it by accident. I asked her to put that in writing, and she has yet to respond. We had 182 ineligible voters and 542 voters. That's 36% of the vote. We were denied a new election by the Rules Committee. Michael Wagman and the Credentials Committee hearing gave false testimony as to the amount of ineligible voters. They provided a correct and accurate account. I did a subsequent audit of the June 14th voter registration list, and again, 182 ineligible voters. The speaker and several elected officials who were on the opposing slate bused in 5 busloads of people, which included 16 Republicans, 72 non-registered people, and at our election, 22 people registered to vote, and 19 people registered to vote. The registrar's office has already confirmed with me that Sergio Carrillo has not turned in any of the voter registration forms, which is a crime. I have yet to receive the receipt of the claims that he turned in, and we're still waiting for that information. I proved without a doubt that my election was a fraud. It was completely a fraudulent election, and yet Keith Yamamoto, David Athens, Laura Laramenti, Michael Wagaman, Karen Fowler voted to uphold this fraudulent election. I believe the process is corrupt. I believe all of you that upheld that election are corrupt. And I'm hoping that the other members here, the newer members who are hopefully progressive, will address these very serious issues. We have no one representing our community. We have 2 mayors, vice mayors, city council members, school board members who participated in a fraudulent election in AB 63. My district has been denied a voice in Sacramento and within this party, and this was all done intentionally to prevent me from successfully blocking the speaker's automatic endorsement. Since this happened to me 2 years ago, and during the last endorsement process, I successfully received the amount of required signatures to prevent him from being on the consent calendar. He was given the list of delegates. They were contacted within hours, intimidated, and 2 women after the deadline rescinded their signatures, which has never happened in the history of the party. So the corruption in this party is prevalent. It's everywhere, from the bottom to the top, and I hope that new members here address that. Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a question. Maria, I'm sorry about the way that the election was ran. I have a question for you. What would you suggest? What would have helped that from happening? That's what we're here for.
Well, I don't believe that any of the assembly district members should be actually in the districts during these elections. I don't believe that they should be busing any people. I don't believe that when you're going up, I mean, the amount of bylaws that were violated by Central Korea, my name was left off the ballot, for God's sakes. That was intentional. Ballots could have easily been reprinted. Emma said she did it by mistake. I think Emma was trying to take the fall for it, to be honest with you. We've had so many different issues, and I will state that after my election, I posted that, and I encouraged other ADEMs to bring in outside people to vote in their ADEM elections, because you upheld my election, which, I mean, 36% of the people weren't eligible to vote, and yet you felt that was okay to allow the speakers delegates to
We're here to help with the process. And I understand that you feel wrong, and I'm sorry about that, but we're
I don't
here.
feel wrong, but I am. I was.
You were, okay.
My community was.
I apologize. Okay, you were wrong. So what can we do? We're here to make it better. And yeah, the process is not perfect. So we can't stop people from being.
Actually, what you can do is denounce that election, make sure that every delegate in that ADEM is removed, and they are not allowed to vote. They cannot win their election. It's that simple. I proved that. I had to fly to Sacramento with a friend at 4:30 in the morning to put a list of names on a spreadsheet and then go back and audit all these people, because the credential committee was too lazy to do it themselves, and the rules committee. So the fact is, the process is corrupted. And there's been a lot of suggestions on how to fix that. But the fact is when you're going up against the Speaker's Assembly, which I'm sure everyone knows I'm running against the Speaker, and you get 46% of the vote with $18,000, and he spent over $1 million, he's going to do everything he can to protect himself, protect his endorsement, and to protect his seat. And I believe these people here, including you, are here to protect his seat.
So Maria, this is Dina. I go through 8050. I sort of want to ask again what Mervette was asking, which is, so us on the committee, we're designed to put together a process. So for the next election, I understand that you have a problem with the last election, but do you have any process or participation suggestions for our committee for this next upcoming election?
Okay, so follow the bylaws. Make sure that everyone is informed. None of the Democrats were ever informed, which is something that I brought up. No one was told in my district about this election. That was intentional. If somebody's name is left off the ballot, hold off on the election until their name is put on the ballot. I mean, simple stuff. This is all common sense. I got a voter registration list, and I could easily check online and do the voter registration and check. They could have checked then and there. This was a rushed process. It was all done intentional. The whole thing was, it was like a circus in there. And Sergio Carrillo, who failed miserably at his job, I requested that he be sanctioned. That didn't happen. I mean, I had David Atkins publicly stating that I committed election fraud all over social media after my election, when I'm the one that went to the trouble to prove that it occurred. And I'm clearly frustrated because, again, You need to follow your own bylaws, for God's sake. I mean, if you could do that, I mean, I wouldn't even be standing here. I would be a delegate right now. I'd be a e-board. But the fact is, the party doesn't follow their own bylaws. So we need to put in, and the Blue Revolution has great proposals. All of those things should be implemented.
Right.
And I don't have a lot of faith that that's going to happen.
I have a question, Maria. Would you say that it would be fair, like, because obviously you're up against, you know, you say the speaker of the assembly. I'm not in my area, but would you say that, given what happened to you in your election, that things like vote by mail, electronic voting, and even remote location voting would actually be more susceptible to being corrupted because we're not there to see what's happening? It's like if you're going against that in real time in person, I couldn't imagine the money spent for remote locations that nobody's monitoring except for people being there to monitor. So would you agree that that actually opens it up to more things against what happened to you?
I think that is possible. I mean, right now we know that the March election is going to be done in those new locations. And I can tell you, we've been walking the precincts, and most people don't even know that. They think they're going to the church or the local high school. So it's a problem. But I believe that the party, I mean, even where our ADEM election is located, was at the far end in the whitest neighborhood in my district. So anyone in Val and Maywood, it's the opposite end of the district, and that's intentional. All of these things are intentional. So the party does not want new people to come in and vote. The fact is, there are 22 people in my district that registered to vote that think that, well, they think they're registered to vote, that aren't. And we're going to actually be getting a registration for the 70th to be able to prove, but the 22 people that registered in my district, that he never turned in. And I do expect to get that receipt that he keeps talking about of the people that voted, that registered to vote. But, you know, the thing is, money is power. And these people use their money to corrupt every aspect of this process. So I can see exactly your point, but we have to make it fair so that people have access and are able to. I think online voting, there is we do OPA voting in the California Progressive Alliance that's done online, and it's all done, and like you said, they give you a password and then it disappears once you vote. So.
Thank you, Mr. Strong.
I have another question.
Oh, you know, we're out of time. So let's take one more speaker and then we'll comments for the next phase.
Sure. My name is Melissa Michelson. I'm a delegate from AB 49. I'm going to bring up several different points because I observed several different ADEM elections. The first one is about giving notice about the ADEM election to voters. Many voters complained to me that they've never been told about these elections. The bylaw states that notice is to be sent to all attendees who had participated in last ADEMs. I find that highly questionable because I participated in the past ADEMs and I never got a notice as a past participant or voter. The next one is that, again, as you've heard today, many attest that Democrats living outside of the respective ADs participated, and in some ADs people were being bussed in again like 2 years ago. In my AD 49, voters' hands were stamped when we got our ballots. Sometimes they got stamped on the right, sometimes they got stamped on the left. No one ever checked stamped hands, not even when we put our ballots in the box. So technically, someone could have received 2 ballots. In terms of whether someone lived in the area, of course, there was no ID check. I'm not quite sure how to address that situation because I myself am not comfortable with doing ID checks as well. But if that's going to avoid non-Democrats from voting and people that don't live in that ID for voting, I prefer that IDs got checked. The registration, the part about candidate speeches, that was also mentioned, that happened in my AD 49, and I attended AD 41, where candidate speeches have started, but people were outside waiting in line. They didn't get to hear the candidate speeches, but voting had started. Volunteers, the people that counted ballots, 10 to 20 of them, none of them should have been candidates for ADD or 8 e-board representatives. In AB 49, there were political staffers that were aligned with the slates supported by politicians in the area, and I didn't think that they should be counting our ballots. In terms of certifying the results, I had asked to be present, or at least to be told when Unique would be counting and certifying the results, because we put in some challenges, but counting got done up in Sacramento, and then later we were informed. In AD 41, 2 concerned Democrats flew up to Sacramento because in AD 41, the LACDP conveners made major mistakes in the counting using the calculator. And several people went up to Sacramento to double check this and make a whole new spreadsheet, and that changed the results of the delegate wins. So also the CRC commission, they did a telephone call, the hearing. I put in one of my complaints, and I was never told about that hearing, so I had no idea that that was happening. That was also a very top-down, one-way communication. People could just listen to that.
Michael said your time is up.
Okay, just finishing up, there was just no engagement. And the last thing, is media. People were, it said bylaw say that it's open to the public and the media, but this was inconsistently applied.
Okay, thank you. All right, so unfortunately, we do have to clear the room because there's another meeting coming up. Right.
You should have cut people's comments down to 1 minute. You
Thank-
shouldn't have had all this back and forth. There are people here who came to
Thank
express
you.
themselves.
I would encourage everyone to submit their comments online. They will all be considered. They will all be considered, and it's best actually in writing so that we can review them carefully. I can tell you that every single comment that is submitted online will be considered. And I want to thank everybody for coming today.